What makes the achievement of emotional sobriety so difficult is the habits we have, the patterns we have in our behavior, the habitual ways that we've come to think about things. We have to really become aware of those things in order to challenge them, because the consciousness that has created a lot of the problems in our life cannot solve it, cannot change things. So what happens is the first step is waking up. Well, as those of you that have been with us for a while know that we are on step 5 tonight. We admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. We have been discussing the steps and the therapeutic value of the steps, the impact of the steps, especially in terms of how they help us develop what we've come to call a self-esteem that's based on authenticity and humility. A very grounded self-esteem. We define self-esteem as the evaluation we have of ourselves, right? How we feel about ourselves. And we're relying heavily on the work of Dr. Nathaniel Branden to discuss the different components of self-esteem. And if you've been here the last several weeks, Herb started our discussion on step 5, and then Roger came in sharing his thoughts about it. And last week, Tom did a great job and brought in a wonderful song that got us all to reflect and access another part of ourselves. And tonight, I want to continue that discussion, and I want to focus on a couple different components of this step. First of all, is this idea about self-disclosure and disclosing what we've learned about ourselves with another person. Those of you that have heard me talk about step 5 before say one of the things that this is teaching us is, first of all, that it's very important that I don't self-analyze myself and keep all that information to myself, right? This is not a soliloquy. We don't want to just get into a dialogue with ourselves. That it's so important, and there's such a therapeutic value to me saying out loud to another person what I'm learning about myself and what I've become aware of. I like to think of that the person that we do this with, that it requires that person to be an enlightened witness. We all want to be seen. That's a deep desire that each and every one of us has. And it's opening the door for us to be truly seen. And now remember, this is going against, Roger, I love when Roger started this out. Who wants to be this honest about what's going on with themselves? Who wants to talk about who they're not? I mean, that goes against our natural instinct. Our natural instinct, meaning that it goes against our false self and all the rules of our false self. Our false says, you don't want to expose your weaknesses. You don't want anybody to see behind the curtain. You don't want anybody to pull the curtain back and like they did on the Wizard of Oz and see that you're just this little tiny person sitting at this control center with this big, impressive, Oz that you've created as the image of who you are. No one wants to do that. And yet, and this was a great point that Roger made, there is something freeing about us being our authentic self. There's something freeing about taking the shackles off from the false self and creating space in our life for us to show up. I'll never forget, I had a patient one time that says, Dr. Berger, you've helped me audition for a speaking role in my own life. You see, that's one of the things that happen, is that we start to reclaim our life. We start to recover our true self. And the being able to be witnessed by someone, especially an enlightened witness. Now, what do I mean by an enlightened witness? I mean someone who has taken this journey themselves, who has done their own work, who is able to sit with us and help us see things about ourselves that we can't see yet, that has worked on their own blind spots so that they have a greater vision than we have. It can't be the blind leading the blind. We're not going to go anywhere. We're going to stumble. We need someone who's enlightened to some degree. So the person that we choose to take this step with becomes a very, very important choice in our experience. Now, I say that because when we talk about the exact nature of our wrongs, today I really want to spend most of my time being able to kind of shed some light on that and to create at the least some thoughtfulness about what does that mean? Is this step the same as going into a confessional and admitting how you're wrong and then being blessed and forgiven so that you're okay? Is that the purpose of what's happening here in step 5? I think not. I don't think that this is a confession. This is self-disclosure. This is about increasing our awareness of ourselves. And you're going to understand what I mean by that when I start to explore what it means to discuss the exact nature of our wrongs. Because I think many people have a mistaken idea about what that means. So if I'm doing my 5th step with, let's say, Roger or Herb or Tom, and I sit down and say, you know, I got to admit that one of the things that I've done wrong is I've lied to people. And since, you know, Roger is the enlightened witness that he is, as we've all experienced him to be that in this meeting, he would say, Alan, but what do you think caused you to lie? What was going on that your truth wasn't okay? How come your truth wasn't good enough for you? You see, that very question that Roger would ask me, and I know he would, gets me to not focus on the lie, but to focus on what generated that behavior. What was underlying that behavior? So let's think about this for a minute. Let's first of all talk about what does it mean when we say nature, the exact nature of our wrongs. Well, I went to the dictionary. I like to do that when I'm looking at words and to seeing what the dictionary says. So the dictionary defined nature as the basic features or inherent features of something. Basic, it means what's underneath, what's underlying that particular behavior. If I was manipulating people, we could say, well, that was wrong. You were manipulating people to get them to do things your way. But the other question becomes, what motivated you? How come you motivated people? How come you manipulated people rather than asked people for what you wanted? How come you couldn't be authentic about what you wanted? How come what you wanted wasn't okay? You see, if I start to explore what my manipulation was about by going down, right, to the basic nature of my wrong, I start to look at, you know, one of the things that you've heard Herb talk about, and I was thinking my sponsor, Tom, you know, also talked about this, is that as we start to whittle this down, we start to find that there's an incredible unworthiness inside of us, that we don't feel ourselves to be lovable, that we don't feel that we're going to be accepted as we are, that we're not good enough, that we won't belong. Well, they go on to say, when you talk about nature, is that it's the innate or essential qualities of a person. Interesting. What's at the core here? What is the essential qualities? What is going on? What is motivating my behavior to act in these ways that I don't feel good about, that oftentimes violate my own values, but yet I feel compelled to do? What's driving that? Where is that energy coming from? Another definition I have of nature is an inborn or hereditary characteristics as an influence or determinant of personality. Well, you've heard me talk about that. One of the things that drives us in life is the desire to connect, to join. It's also our instinct to be our own person. So sometimes when you start looking at the exact nature of our wrongs, what these boils down to is how I believe I have to function in order to connect and to join you and to have a relationship with you. How I feel about being my own person. Whether or not I feel like that's okay to do. Is it okay for me to say what I want? One of the things I realized in the work that I've done with myself is that a lot of my selfishness came from the fact I didn't know how to take care of myself. It was an amazing thing that I had it so backwards. Now, when we look at the word exact, a very peculiar thing happened to me today as I started to dig into that. So we all think of exact nature, right? To be accurate, correct in detail, and describing what the nature of that was. That's one way of looking at what exact means. I want to be as thorough, right, as I can possibly be about being clear and honest about what's been going on for me. Now, remember, as I'm doing this, my self-awareness is blossoming. I remember the aha moments that took place in step 5 for me. It's like somebody turned the lights on. Herb talks about that dimmer switch. Well, my sponsor cranked that thing way up that day that we were doing this step. I mean, we spent hours and hours together as we went through what I wrote. But there's another way of thinking of exact. When we say someone's exacted something from someone, it means that they've demanded something from someone. So one way we can start to think of step 5 is the exact nature. What part of my nature was demanding that life be what I wanted it to be, that people were the way I wanted, that they had to be the way I thought that they should be for me to be okay? So we can start to think about the exact nature as my demanding nature, how I am imposing my set of expectations and rules on life and on people to be what I think I need them to be, and for life to be what I think I need it to be for me to be okay. In Bill's letter, he calls this an impossible way of life. And I can testify to that. It is impossible. Every day is a challenge about how it's not going to go my way. And because I have no idea on how to deal with life as it is, it became a challenge every time I got crossed with the reality. What an important step this is. This step is helping us develop a relationship with ourselves in a very different way. Because if I'm sharing all of this with an enlightened witness, then what I start to come to, and this is a very important feature of self-esteem, is I come to a greater acceptance of myself. And I come to that greater acceptance of myself because I'm with someone who starts to show me the humanity of my struggles, starts to help me get in touch with that. What I'm really experiencing are the conditions of being human, the givens of being a human being in this world, and the things I'm up against as a human being. How do I join and connect? How do I become a part of? How do I hold on to myself and keep a sense of myself and still be in a relationship? How do I cooperate with you without losing myself? See, these are all the givens of life that each and every one of us has to struggle with. And we never get the tools to develop that capacity when we're growing up in the culture that we grow up in and with our families. And I'm not, faulting them. I'm just saying they don't have it. They can't give us something that they don't have. We are victims of victims, or we are the result of people that are struggling as well and gave us everything they could, which is never enough. This step 5, begins having a new relationship with ourselves and with our experience with life, and eventually leads to a new experience with others. So with that being said, I will invite my esteemed colleagues to join me, and we will wrap up step 5 tonight and look forward to step 6 next time.
Do you just want the esteemed colleague?
Yeah.
Can I come too?
Yeah, you're welcome to. We'll make an exception tonight for you, Tom. Since you did such a great job last week, we are going to.
Speaking of exact, I just thought you were being awfully exact when you said I want my esteemed colleagues. I
thought I'd stay with the theme here.
Hi, guys.
Hey, Tom.
Good seeing you, Tom.
Herb, I think you're still muted, actually. There we go.
He's faking it.
It looks like you still might be muted from what my thing says. Say something, Herb.
No, you can't mute me.
Ah, there you know. Well, they did in the monastery, 7 years.
He chose it. I don't know
but
why,
you notice he said you can't mute.
Hasn't stopped talking since.
Well, but he chose that. You got it, Tom. You pointed that out. He chose that.
That's right. He chose it. That's right.
But we're not going to mute you.
We will never mute you.
Not even
all right. Who wants to kick this off, gentlemen?
Well, I'll do it. It's just because I don't have a lot. First of all, the blind leading the blind. I'm sorry, I'm an old guy, and I go, that reminds me of a story. It's like my friend Bedford Combs, and some people may know Bedford. Bedford trained with Sharon Cruz, who trained with Virginia Satir, so he's part of that lineage. I used to work with my wife, and I used to work with him in his week-long intensive programs, and we became really, really close friends. But there's one time when we were there, and one of the things we would do at the beginning of each of the programs on the first day or so is we'd do a trust walk, and we didn't blindfold anybody. We just did, the person who was going to be led just closed their eyes and because we didn't need to traumatize anybody anymore. But I'll just tell the short version. The short version is Bedford and I we paired ourselves up together, and we each thought the other one was leading. So we both had our eyes closed, and we took off, supposedly walking in this line behind these other people, but of course neither one of us could see the line. So we just wandered off until we stumbled around until we finally, one of us opened the eyes and realized that we were the blind leading the blind. So that I proved that experientially that does not work. But I really appreciate Alan talking about the exact nature part, because I feel a little inadequate saying this, but it's like I never really focused there so much on in the fifth step. It's like, and somehow those words just really are, you know, as we go back through this with emotional sobriety, this has, each time we go back through with one angle or the other, I see something brand new. It really is like looking at things from different angles. It's like a perspective thing. It's like, hey, you know, come over here and look at this from under here. And it's like, oh, wow, I never saw that. And so I just want to just go, what I just did is I just asked myself, what's the exact nature, and how do we do that? And I realized as I was thinking, as I was listening to you today, I was thinking about, okay, well, one of the aspects of the exact nature was, when you talk about what motivates me to do that, is that underlying, it takes me immediately to that feeling of I'm not enough. Which takes me to, I will do the brief version, takes me to a place where I feel the need to be dishonest, to represent myself as something that I'm not, which leads me to do things that are not congruent with my own value systems. So ultimately, it comes down to something that I've actually written about in several different places. Probably first in that recovery, the recovery decision thing that you've read, Alan, is that there's a behavioral and expressed value split. That the one of the ways to describe, you know, the exact nature or the underlying nature of my dishonesty, that included alcohol use, but it was much more than just that, was this value split where my behavior, if you think about expressed values and behavioral values, I mean, I say that the briefest example of that, or the quickest example, is my first wife, you know, was hearing me plead with her to, you know, please stay with me. Don't leave me. Don't leave me. Don't leave me. Don't leave me. While my behavior was, I was continuing to drink and behave horribly, in the relationship. And ultimately, one of the great tragedies there, and I'm very aware of this, and when I see it in others, is the exact nature of my wrongs put her in a position where the person who was actually, who wanted the relationship to work and who was willing for the relationship to do the work of the relationship, had to take it out back and shoot it. You know, she had to stop listening to my expressed values. She had to, you know, she had to figure that out. She had to stop doing that, and she had to listen only to my behavior. You know, when somebody shows you who they are, believe them. It's like she had to do that, and I just, you know, and no support for me, because I was just acting offended as all kinds of hell. But that is it, when I get down to the healing, I can see that across the board in my healing, is finding those places, not as blatant, you know, as I move through life now. But I think the exact nature is very similar, though. Where's the value split?
Yeah.
You know, where am I not living up to what I want my values to be? You know, and that brings us back to the thing I was talking about last time, which was, you know, step 5 being the introduction to what I think of as honesty as a way of life.
Yeah.
You know, it's you risk sharing with another person, that enlightened witness. You talk, and Herb talks about that beautifully in terms of just the how essential having the courage to do that is. And so that you can live a life of radical honesty, which is not, radical honesty is not, I'm going to tell everybody everything. It just means that they're the people who, you know, that I'm not, there's a difference between privacy and secrecy. I'm not going to live with secrets.
Yeah.
You know, there's, you know, and somebody is, and the other thing I talked about last time too, is somebody is as near as I can do it. And that's, I'm a human being. Somebody is going to know all of me, or as much as I know. And I'm not going to compartmentalize and put little pieces of me here and there. And that's what I love about step 5. It's like, open up the double doors. Let's go in there. So, but value split, that's what I got today. So thank you.
Herb, I'll defer to you if that's okay with you.
Oh, that'd be fine. Thank you, Alan, very much. And this is all so synergistic, I think is the right word, in terms of certainly what I'm reading, thinking about, being asked to share about. This is so complementary to everything that I'm doing. I'm really appreciative of this forum and format to be able to continue to integrate experience, not just to get some information, which I am doing, but to integrate it. And I do use the word disclosure, Alan. I do not use the word confession for lots of reasons, but disclosure is really the term. And my primary experience, and I think I might have expressed it in my opening comments a couple of weeks ago, and that is I am asked a question, I'm given some information, I do some memory, I do some thinking, I do some writing, but I'm doing it over a sequence of days or weeks. In my case, it was months, and discreetly. I mean, making a notebook and organizing it and all the rest of that, but not reviewing, just moving forward, plowing the ground.
Yeah.
In the fourth step. And then when I sit to read it out loud for the very first time, although I've learned a tremendous amount, I began to connect the dots, even in the discrete process of accumulating the information. There's a gestalt, to use your term, there's a gestalt that happens when I read it out loud, especially in front of a person.
Yes.
They don't have to say anything. They don't have to have any reaction or feedback. That's not the point. It's just more real when you're saying it out loud and, in fact, to a person or a group of people. And it really, you focused on the exact nature. I'm going to focus on, because this is the word that I'm using this entire year in terms of trying to dig deeper in the principle. What it reveals to me principles, the sources, the underlying ground from which this is the wellspring. Now, Bill uses the term selfishness, self-centeredness, which is, of course, the root, he says, and I operate on that basis. And then we see how it manifests. That's the black and white, but we see it how it manifests in color. As we think it, as we feel it, as we move our feet. And then as I'm saying it out loud, I'm seeing it in color again for the very first time. And my total experience, and you've heard me many times, Alan, talk about I don't know what I don't know, and I can't see what I can't see. And that's most shocking to me. Yeah. That there was that, it's a structural limitation for me, and it appears to be certainly for addicts, but probably broadly for most human beings. There is it's not a conscious repression, suppression, or denial. It's like, no, it's not available information. And this begins to surface. One of my teachers calls it the evacuation of the unconscious. The cellular structure begins to loosen up, and everything that's recorded begins to float to the top. And so I'm seeing my beliefs, my motives, my values, and most simply, the image I really like is that we're shining a light, which is revealing the shadows in us that block us from a relationship with ourselves, certainly with other people or with life. But it blocks my relationship with myself, and because of that connection and the awareness, I then have the ability to be free if I take the action based on that now new information, but new experience. I have found very definitely information is really good, but you've seen me do this too. I had a lot of information, but I had no transformation. Until this gets processed through the heart to the feet, nothing changes. And so that's I had to hear it to experience it. Thanks.
Oh, thank you.
Evacuation of your subconscious is going to give me nightmares. So I'll be thanking you in the middle of the night, Herb. That's fucking scary.
I think there's going to be a clown from Stephen King's It show up.
It's funny. I had the same reaction, Tom. I use biological metaphors a lot. So as soon as Herb said evacuation, man,
I looked right.
You went a different direction, Herb, which I appreciated. You know, you talked about, yeah. But it amounts to the same thing. Evacuation of the subconscious is exactly.
So the fourth and fifth step is the Roto-Rooter.
Well, exactly. All right, Herb, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Do I have your permission to read a couple passages from 12 Steps to Spiritual Awakening from chapter 5?
Now, it's not a paid commercial.
I understand it's not, but I did want to ask your permission. Because Alan, you had mentioned with regard to the enlightened witness, you want somebody who has worked on their own blind spots, is how you put it, who's done the work themselves. And in God, if we were only so lucky as to have the author of this book here with us, right? 12 Steps to Spiritual Awakening, enlightenment for everyone. In chapter 5, on step 5, Herb wrote, and this is written as a prayer: healing spirit of the universe, I cannot see what I do not see. I cannot hear what I do not hear. I do not know that I do not know. Please open my eyes, open my ears, open my mind, but especially open my heart to really want to see, to really want to hear, to really want to know. Allow me to accept at depth my blindness, my deafness, my ignorance. Please allow me to see, hear, and know the sources of my brokenness.
Nice.
In all their manifestations. I read that earlier today and I got goosebumps, Herb, because it addresses the willingness to look at our blind spots. In terms of self-disclosure, it expresses so beautifully the opening that can occur. Yeah. And I have an additional comment about that, but the opening that can occur to begin to heal my brokenness through revealing it, right? I remember when I first started working with people in my 20s, I was so invested in looking good, right? In having the answers, in making sure that the client I was working with had confidence in me, and so on. And with time and experience, I came to enjoy so much the process of self-disclosure with my clients, too much so, probably. I have to call myself out about it. My clients are usually too nice, okay, to do so, but occasionally I have to call, wow, I just went on too long, right? If I'm giving an example from my life. And I always try to be aware, is this going to be helpful to them in their struggle? That is the beginning point for me. But still, it's so freeing to be able to be human, right? To be able to share my faults and my defects and my mistakes and imperfections and limitations. So that's one point I wanted to make. And I wanted to thank you, Herb, very much for that prayer, for that passage. It's so eloquent and meaningful, I think.
And thorough. I just want to say that is a thorough prayer. No, I'm serious. That is a beautiful, thorough prayer. Yeah.
I won't stop there, because I was reading through this, and there's another besides, because to me, that's a great example of living more consciously. Oh my gosh, I almost left that out. But that prayer is the epitome to me of the quest to live more consciously. I'm asking for awareness of my blind spots. Yeah. I'm asking for awareness of what I do not see, do not hear, do not feel. All right. I see a question come up on the chat. Again, that reading is taken from a book by Herb K. titled 12 Steps to Spiritual Awakening, enlightenment for everyone. He goes on in terms of self-esteem to also talk about, as a meditation at the end of that chapter, step 4 and 5 are the beginning of a journey into emotional and spiritual maturity, an initiation, a passage from the self-centered, self-obsessed way of the child. We're on a journey to another way of life. And in the course of this meditation, I won't read the whole thing, he says, as a part of this process, again, related to steps 4 and 5, we take responsibility for our thoughts. We take responsibility for our feelings. We take responsibility for our perceptions, for how we see things, right? We take responsibility for our lives, who we are, what we are, how we are. And you've heard us mention several times that an increasing ability to take responsibility for our lives, for our values that we choose, for our choices, and for our words and actions is a huge piece of self-esteem, one of Brandon's 6 pillars of self-esteem. So Alan, your emphasis on self-disclosure, rather than it being a confessional, I like that so much. The other thing I wanted to add is, to me, one of the participants very courageously shared a couple meetings ago that step 5 was no big deal for her because she's so critical toward herself all the time and so down on herself all the time that it was like just more of the same, right? And I understand that because I can relate. The parts of me that still struggle with unworthiness, the parts of me that still struggle with being able to let in love, to receive, much harder than giving love to me, much more challenging. But for me, a way of talking about that is, and that helps me share my imperfections more openly, is, do I judge my behavior when I'm talking about the things I regret and my imperfections and limitations, or do I condemn myself as a person? And I've done a fair amount of both, believe me, in the course of my life, right? But it makes such a difference if I get finally enough self-acceptance and enough, self-valuing under my feet, where I'm no longer or only rarely condemning myself as a person, but still able to look at what I judge in myself in terms of my words and my actions. So getting there is a long, long process, one that I'm still engaged in. But that's a distinction that I find meaningful and very important in looking at our imperfections. So thanks all 3 of you tonight. And thank you, Herb, so much for your writings.
There you go. Everybody got their copy right here. It's like,
I pull mine out too.
Let me just add this to this discussion tonight, because I was thinking that you guys, look, one of the things I love about this, and I'm echoing what Herb said, it's so stimulating to be a part of this, because I bounce off your ideas, you bounce off mine. The synergy is just incredible for me. And I was thinking, like, if I start to whittle down the exact nature, what might that look like? Well, one exact nature that I can see is when I decided I had to be someone other than who I am to be okay. You see, that what came from that were so much disowning of myself, so much trying to be someone I'm not, so much trying to get you to accept an image of who I want you to think of me as, which then I became very manipulative and lying and playing games and all that. So that's one. But it also related, and we've talked about this, Herb, and you'll recognize when I say it, is how little faith I had in my ability to grow. And to be able to cope with life as life was. It was such the way I wrote it here is I have little to no faith in my capacity to support myself. No ability to take responsibility for my well-being, for my validation, for my happiness, for my satisfaction. And therefore, I transfer that responsibility to you, to life, right? To anyone and anything that'll take it. That's when I go way deep down inside, that's what generated so much behavior that was dishonoring myself. That was a part of a big lie. Yeah, go ahead, her.
Perfect. Again, the synergy. Today I'm reading a essay by Eric Fromm on conscience, because he wants to talk about principles. And there's a line in there that just completely supports, I think, what you just said. And that is, he said, guilt and shame may be byproducts of our fear that our needs are not going to be met from the outside, because we have a default, I'm paraphrasing, we have a default position of looking outside to be rewarded, or a fear that from outside we will be punished.
Right on.
That's what you're talking
Right,
about.
exactly it. See, that's and from that stems so much. I mean, just think of how much behavior. I mean, because what Fromm said, what he would say the exact nature of our problem is that we look at ourselves as a commodity, not as a person.
I have been formed from the outside, therefore I need to be changed from the outside, and I need to get people or circumstances or events to be able to be different in order for me to be okay. And the experience of the fourth and fifth step, at the first time I went through the steps, was the very beginning, just the beginning.
Yes.
Of that, oh my God. I'm looking out from to the outside. I need to look from the inside, and whether that's a combination of God and my information and my will and activity, or whatever it is. I like your more simple approach is let the best in me attempt to manage the worst in me.
And now think about how this changes our self-esteem.
Oh my gosh.
Because when I look at myself from, let's say, that I'm a commodity perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm evaluating myself based on a whole set of shoulds.
Oh yeah.
And those
it's totally disempowering.
It's totally disempowering. And see what we're also saying here through this process and what's happening in these steps is we're changing the criteria and standard by which we evaluate ourselves.
Yeah.
We're we're no longer looking at ourselves.
That's the turnaround.
That's through those glasses that we need a new prescription, right? We need to get those lenses ground differently, because when I look at them through the old glasses, I'm never going to be enough. Now we put on a new pair of glasses, and now we start to look at ourselves in a very different way and see. So this is how the steps are now changing our relationship to ourselves. And therefore, we have a chance to finally not have an adversarial relationship to ourselves, as Brandon talks about.
Right. Okay. Now, this brings us to my sentence, which I want to dedicate to Roger, which is, here's the sentence. I have evacuated my subconscious. I need to be changed.
Oh, God. Well said.
Do you have a pair of Depends?
Oh, that was a wonderful play on words. Oh my, can anybody change my diaper, please? If only the women in our lives knew that we were going in a relationship, say, hey honey, would you mind changing my diaper? I'm a big baby.
I think some women figure that out quickly enough with us or other men they may be with, that at some level we're going to be asking for that in some ways, normally indirectly, of course, right? But still.
From your perspective, Tom and Brian, do you want to add, and Declan, anything to this conversation about step 5 tonight?
What I will add is just because this is fairly recent, over the past couple of years, as a receiver of a fifth step, it's allowed me to give someone an opportunity to share their secrets, and some of it which they, decided they were unworthy of recovery based on behavior, so I'm not going to get into any of the details other than to say to be able to listen and be that enlightened partner and to have spiritual license to essentially say it's okay, you can still recover, you're still worthy. I think it opens a door to allowing them to build their self-esteem from there. It's a wonderful experience. Say like, you're welcome, you're still welcome, stay here.
And that might happen. That feeling of welcome might happen because of the experience of just being witnessed to. They get it.
Right.
They get it. The words are not even necessary. That's a very good point, actually.
Yeah. Brian.
If I'm going to follow the trend of honesty tonight. I have been so caught up in what is happening to me. I don't know if I heard a single word tonight. And it's nothing about anything that anybody said. I am so in my experience. I can't think about anything else. And I wish I could talk more about what's happening. It's difficult to talk about it without being able to talk about it. But specifically on the topic, I don't know if I have. There was something, Alan, you said after the reading, which was you made a comment about our demands about reality, and it's just. You said so. It rang my head like a gong. Is that there are these experiences that happen every once in a while. This was happening to me, being one of them. It's made me so acutely aware of what my demands on reality are, because of how upset I am that they're not being met. But I know intellectually I understand that idea, but to understand the gravity of what that can mean in specific situations is heavy. And this is one of those where I'm just like, oh, that's what that means. I don't know if I'm ready for that.
Well,
holy shit. Wow. So anyways, that's what's in my head, not on topic, but
And listen, let's also get Patrick in here since he's one of the hosts of this meeting. So Patrick, join us too. How about you, Declan? What are your thoughts about this step? And then we'll have Patrick, and then we'll wrap up the meeting tonight.
Today I was reading some ACA literature and talking about that. And I've always been so inspired by Claudia Black and her book, It'll Never Happen to Me. And she said the 3 rules of a dysfunctional family are don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. And from that, a false self gets created to navigate home, and then school, and then dating, and then work, and it fails miserably usually. And that's so the key out is to find the true self. And you could just do the opposite: talk, trust, feel. And we talked about that banner hanging in Nathaniel Brandon's therapy room, "No one is coming." I always imagined hanging one that said talk, trust, feel. And then it hit me in the 5th step, you're doing that. You're talking to the person, you're trusting them with it, and you're probably feeling a lot as you read it. And you really kind of reclaim the true self. And that's what I was thinking about, the 5th step, and you guys talking tonight.
Well stated, Declan.
Thank you, Declan. Very much so. Yeah.
Thanks for calling on me. I've been kind of like radio silence with loved ones about some of the trouble I've been going through lately. And I spent some time this evening or early this afternoon calling people up and just talking and dragging some of the problems out into the light. And I've gained a lot from each person. That it's really just 2. It was like my sponsor and my dad. that saying, everybody, it gets annoying. Everybody says it, but you're only as sick as your secrets. So I'm just trying not to keep secrets and just try to be transparent and that I'm in the dark about a lot of my relationships, but I'm trying to get better, and I'm trying to know myself so that I can navigate these situations with more clarity. So thank you.
Walk toward the light.
But see, look, this is such a great example for all you guys, and thank you guys for being,
Yep.
so open and honest with where you're at. That's what I think happens here, is that we're enough as we are. We don't need to have the answers. We can be ignorant. We can be not knowing. We can be making mistakes. We can be struggling. There's room for all of us here, and that's what we're learning here as we do step 5. Well, thanks, Tom. Why don't you take us out tonight, and we'll see everybody next week as we kick off step 6, and that'll be you, Herb, to give us
all
the
right.
intro to step 6 next time.
All right.
Wonderful. Can we have a moment of silence for the still sick and suffering beings, no matter where they may be or what they may be suffering from?
And a moment of silence for Brian. Let us all put
Yeah,
on our.
he's included in the everyone,
We're gonna put the spotlight on him.
especially Brian. Love you, brother.
I hear a lot of people criticize the 12 steps, that they're old-fashioned. I can understand that criticism. They were written back in 1935. Some people that are agnostic have difficulty with the word God used in the steps. For me, I look at the process that's involved. The forces that the 12 steps generate are so powerful that I think they're ageless. There's this interesting phenomena that happens when you work the steps. They create a charge and then a discharge. The first step, we're powerless. Our life has become unmanageable. It creates this charge. We're in big trouble and we don't know what to do. And then step 2 comes along and it says we have hope. That charge, that existential crisis that we have is resolved. What's happening here is parallel to life. We charge ourselves when we breathe in. When we exhale, we discharge. That's the rhythm of life. And the way I love to think about the 12 steps, it's helping us get connected to the rhythm of life so we can learn how to show up in a good way.